I'm Cindy Speaker with Speaker Media and Marketing, the new American dream for personal injury attorneys. Well, the old American dream for personal injury lawyers began with you went and you got your college degree, you came out of law school, there was such a bright future for lawyers at that time. The cases were plentiful, the insurance companies paid the claims, and so I actually began my career in 1994, and at that time we did a huge volume practice. I was the marketing director for a Philadelphia law firm. We also handled New York and Washington, D.C., where we had offices. And what I found is that it was a high volume practice, and it was interesting because the biggest day we ever had was Martin Luther King Day in the late 90s, and I remember having 176 calls, new case calls, which is just unheard of today. Because what was happening is there wasn't the competition. When you put an ad on TV, advertising still worked. Advertising was credible. It isn't anymore. So the old American dream was that you went to law school, you came out of law school, you get into a firm, you're mentored by someone, you develop in your career, and as time progresses, you find that you have a lucrative career, that you do very well. And part of that is because of the economic climate and because insurance companies were still paying claims. And so it was a good career. It was something that you could make a very good living at, and you would often be able to really be pretty much set by the time you were in your late 50s or so. I think the downfall of the American dream for personal injury lawyers began with the change in insurance companies. And what I mean by that is insurance companies began in the 90s and really in early 2000 especially. They stopped paying claims for what we call soft tissue injuries. And so there's a person who is injured. It may not be a horrific injury, but it's still an injury that interrupts their life. They may not be able to go to work, they lose time at work, etc. But instead of the insurance company stepping up to the plate and doing what they're supposed to do because the person paid for this insurance all their life, they fight the claim. So they force the attorney who is handling the claim to make a decision. Do we go into litigation, or do we settle this case for less than it's worth? And so that has caused a huge change, and it was really a change in the lifestyle and the whole future of the legal industry for personal injury lawyers. The other thing that happened with the downfall of the legal industry is a huge change in competition. And so for an attorney who used to just put up a sign and the cases would come, it just wasn't happening anymore. And lawyers were having a difficult time differentiating themselves, and they weren't used to having to differentiate themselves. And so I think that also was very significant in the downfall of the legal industry. And then the other really significant thing has been tort reform. With tort reform, I think that the consumer does not understand the impact of what tort reform is. And recently I was a consultant for the state of North Carolina on their tort reform. And some of the things that they advocated for in this tort reform package was, for instance, to give immunity to ER personnel. What that means is, for instance, I have a neighbor that has terrible allergies. And this has actually happened to her. She goes into the emergency room and maybe a staff member there does not check her chart. So she has a terrible allergic reaction that could put her in the hospital for a period of a week. So what could potentially happen with someone like my neighbor is she has this horrific injury, but under tort reform, potentially the ER could be granted immunity, which means, sorry, ma'am, you are just going to have to, suck it up, because the ER personnel is granted immunity. There's other horrific things in this tort reform, and again, I don't think the consumer understands it. And so therefore, things are being passed in states across the country that are limiting significantly the rights of consumers. And I really believe that the insurance company is behind it. So that has tremendous effect on the legal industry. It's much more difficult to get what the consumer deserves. I Actually, my father was killed by a drunk driver when I was 20 years old. And although he had an insurance agent that he knew all his life, nobody stepped up to the plate and said, Mrs. Speaker, we're going to take care of you. We're going to do the right thing by you. And I can assure you from not only personal experience, but from 15 years in the legal industry, that insurance companies don't volunteer to do the right thing. And so attorneys really, in my mind, are heroes, although the insurance company paints them as the authors of frivolous lawsuits. So I really believe that the insurance companies are behind a lot of the downfall of the personal injury industry and the legal industry in general. The new American dream for a personal injury lawyer is really, in my mind, there's more potential than there's ever been for the attorneys that understand it. And the first thing is, it starts with a mind shift. As a marketing consultant to attorneys throughout the country, what I find, though, is most attorneys don't understand the mind shift. They are much more content to pay to play than to participate to play. And so it's much easier for an attorney to write a check and put their advertising on television. Advertising works, and I'm an advocate of advertising, but that's not enough anymore. There has to be a participation in, whether it's social media, new media, something, because the currency of advertising is money, but the currency of social media and new media is great content. And so somehow there has to be a system for creating and strategically disseminating great content on a consistent basis. The reason that is tremendous news for personal injury attorneys is because right now, at least right now, there's not a lot of attorneys that understand that. So for the attorneys that really understand the mind shift and understand that great content and educating and informing consumers makes a difference, they have the opportunity to live the new American dream. One more thing, one of my favorite marketing gurus is Seth Godin. And what Seth Godin has said recently is, the future of marketing is leadership. And so the attorneys that understand that leadership is about expert positioning, it's about achieving credibility through expert positioning, which comes through some of this great content, they have the ability to live the new American dream.